Hello, BookTube. It's Saturday, and it's time for my book to film. Overdue by 2 weeks. This should have been done 3 weeks ago, actually. Well, no, 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago. But it hasn't been that good the last couple of weeks. And I've tried to do this a few times. It's a little difficult trying to keep everything shorter because there's so much to talk about with this one, or potentially there is. So I'm going to have to condense things and leave some things out. The book itself that I read is Frank Norris's McTeague. It was it's subtitled, let's get this correct, subtitled A Story of San Francisco. It's not so much about San Francisco, though. That's one quibble with the subtitle. An aspect and a street and more specifically, one building or one flat, set of flats. But it was published in 1899. And it starts out with McTeague, the title character. He's a dentist. And we find him, first of all, in the opening pages on a Sunday, his one day off. And he just luxuriates in what he loves, which is getting a large pitcher of steam beer, which is a beer that was just a very cheap beer. There's different ways of making beer, and this was a very cheap way. And, laying in his sort of shea lounge in his dental parlors, which he uses as his office, his dental office, as well as sleeping in a little corner on a little couch. So he's there, smoking his pipe. He likes a pipe, and he smokes very cheap tobacco as well. And he's got a concertina, and he knows 6 tunes, so he plays these 6 tunes. So he drinks his beer, smokes his shag, and plays his tunes, and then falls to sleep, has a nap in the afternoon. And he's surrounded, as I say, he lives in his dental parlor. He calls it dental parlor. And he's got sort of a few prized possessions. He's got a canary in a bird cage that he loves. He's got a little sort of statuette of a little, I think it's a pug, a little dog that was given him, and a picture that he likes. It's a Demiche's court, and he says that he bought it, the print, because there were other prints in the shop, but there were more people in this print, so therefore he thought it was a better deal for the money. Okay, and he lives where he has his dental parlor. It's above a post office. There are others that live on that level. They rent rooms, they're more or less self-contained units, but very small, sort of. They call it an apartment, the whole complex, but they have other rooms. And there's an elderly gentleman that he binds pamphlets. He's retired, but he's a doctor, but he runs a doctor hospital that's out and back in the alley. And next to him is a spinster maid. She's an old dressmaker. And above is McTeague's best friend. He works, he helps out the doctor, the old gentleman, at his dog hospital. And then there's also another character, is a maid of sort of all work. She's a Spanish lady, and she goes around collecting junk, things they want to throw out, and stealing gold from McTeague, from gold fillings, and she takes them to a junkman, Zerkow, and she sells and makes money. And she tells this tall tale of growing up in a rich family somewhere in South America or in Mexico. The story changes a little bit, but having like 100 piece set of golden chalices, bowls, plates, all sorts of things. 100 pieces of solid gold that was taken away from him. She tells us, and it enthralls the junk man, and he wants to hear it over and over and over again. So we proceed. We see McTeague doing his dental work, and shortly in, we find a little bit of a backstory that he grew up on at a mine. His mother was a cook. His father was a miner. He was a bit of a drunkard. He spent most of his money carousing and spending money on drink when payday came. And when McTeague was old enough, he became a car boy. He pushed the cars of ore out of the mine. And his mother worked in the cookhouse. His father eventually dies, and McTeague's mother wants something better for him. So a traveling dentist comes there, and he gets apprenticed to a traveling dentist. And he spends time doing that. And then we find him, where he is today. And the all this action is set, like, that the mine is about 1890, so this is like turn of the 20th century, where the book actually opens. And Marcus, his best friend who lives upstairs, is sort of stepping out with his cousin, Trina. And he has the view of possibly marrying her sometime. Yeah, his cousin. Okay. And all this is on a street called Polk Street, which was a known street in San Francisco. Sort of not lower class, but sort of, upper or lower middle class, I guess it would be. And then there was sort of poor areas off of it. But yeah, so Marcus, I believe it is the Sunday, I think, or no, it's the next day. Well, yeah, he finds out on Sunday that Trina had an accident. Marcus tells McTeague that she's had an accident. She's broken a tooth and maybe loosened another one, and he's going to bring her there. So she comes there, and she doesn't want her tooth taken out. So he figures out a way of trying to help her. He's never done it before, to sort of rebuild the tooth back up with gold. But it's going to take many treatments. So she comes back many times over many weeks, and he falls in love with her, or actually I should say in lust. She's in a lot of pain with I think the very last treatment when he's doing stuff, and he says the only way, she doesn't want to use the gas, so he has some ether. So he uses ether to knock her out, and he gets his lustful urges, and he fights them a little bit, but he doesn't fight them well enough. And there's descriptions of him eyeing her inert body on the chair. It's pretty creepy. And then he kisses her, and then when she wakes up, he asks her to marry him. And she's all scared, and she runs away. But he continues to see her, and they go out, and then at one point he sort of forces himself on her to kiss her. She's repulsed. She's repulsed by him. He's like a hulk of a man, very strong, but not very much upstairs. And the narrator says that he's pretty stupid and slow to act. So she's repulsed by him, but she goes home. And tells her mother, and she says, "Well, are you love?" And then she realizes that she likes the animal power he has. That when he grasps her, it becomes it's a sexual thing for her, and it was considered sort of bad for this book at the time, because it was pretty clear that she was sexually excited by his forcefulness. So she eventually, agrees to marry him, but, Marcus, was going out with her, and he just started saying, "Well, you're my friend, McTeague, or Mac, I'll give her up. I'll give her to you," as if she was something to give away. But that was, it's clear the time period and all that. But anyway, so they eventually get married. She's still sort of repulsed by him. She's not sure if she loves him, but she does love him in some ways. So they get married, but on the eve of sort of the proposal and announcement, While she was getting her dental treatment, the Maria, I think the name is the maid in the building, comes in and sells her a lottery ticket, and that lottery ticket wins, and she gets $5,000 for it. And then at this point, Marcus is jealous. He thinks that he's been stolen. This money has been stolen from him. It should be him because Trina should be his and all this. So it begins an animosity between them, especially with McTeague. So they wind up getting married with his $5,000. She doesn't want to use any of the money. But she does buy him a golden tooth to hang outside his parlor, dental parlor, and he's wanted one all the time. The French gilded one, not the, I don't think it was the German. The German one was cheaper. So she buys this as a present for him. So he's ecstatic that he's got this big golden tooth to hang outside. But that's the only money she really spends. She buys a bit of furniture as well. And instead of putting the money in the bank where she got a lower interest, she puts it with her uncle's business, which is a sort of a department store. And she actually works for her uncle as well, carving little figures. She makes sort of a Noah's Ark thing, and she gets a certain amount of money for that. She gets a better investment, so she gets so much a week for making these figures, carving these out of wood, and then she gets $25 a month interest for this. And McTeague's business is going pretty good and all this. Trina's family moves away. Marcus eventually leaves. But before he leaves, he tells the authorities that McTeague doesn't have a dental license, so they shut him down. So now everything is sort of going downhill. Because he's not working. He tries to get a job. He can't hold down the job. He starts drinking, and it's sort of he's like he's inherited his father's weakness for alcohol and stuff, but he's tried to fight that all the time. But being lowered without money, he reverts to sort of more bestial ways. But he's got used to the better beer because she didn't like him drinking the steam beer. He got used to that, used to better better tobacco, but she doesn't want to pay for that anymore, and she refuses to touch any of the money. So they got to live on what they've got. So they move to cheaper premises, and then and it's just she even deteriorates because of this and becomes more penurious. She just saves every penny, goes through his pocket, saves a penny. She eventually saves like £450 in a Foot Locker in a trunk. That she locks up and keeps hidden from McTeague, and she just keeps telling him, she doesn't have that much. She maybe got $50. In the meantime, before even got to this point, there's other stories that are going on in the building because there's a lot of the characters. Maria, the maid, marries the junk man because he wants to hear this story over and over again about her gold plates, and he thinks that she actually knows where they are, and he becomes obsessed with them. She becomes pregnant, but then the baby is born but then dies. So she gets a little messed up, and then she forgets that she's ever told the story, and she denies she knew anything about this. But he becomes more obsessed, and eventually kills her. And then he is found dead in the bay with a sack of old rusty plates and stuff like this. Anyway, so that's the end of him and her. But they move into the old place where one of the rooms where they lived. Where she was murdered. Trina is scared of this, but she realizes it's half the rent from the hole they were living in after the parlor. So they move again to get it cheaper. And then McTeague finally gets fed up with this, and he says he's going to take the bird cage. She's been on him to take the bird cage to sell it to get some money, but he wouldn't. But he says he's going to that day, and he leaves. He doesn't come back in the evening, and then she rushes back after going out on the street looking for him. She rushes back and realizes that he's broken into her trunk and taken his money. And so she has a collapse. at that point. But they find out because he was getting kind of, physical and beating her a bit, and he bit her fingers a lot. So because she was making these and painting these figures, she gets blood poison. She has to lose several fingers, so she can't make those toys anymore. But she still refuses to take the money out, or use that money that she's got. So she becomes scrubbing floors in a kindergarten school and lives in the back. Or on another floor, and she starts penny saving again. And then she misses having that money, the gold coins that she had. So she eventually takes all the money out, de-invests it with her uncle, and she just, and the saving of the money she was sexually attracted for the power and the bit of violence that McTeague showed towards her. But now she gets sexual fulfillment from the coins, playing with the coins, and she puts, $20 coins, gold coins of all the 5,000 on her bed. She sleeps on them, naked, and she gets the thrill of this. McTeague comes back. She wants nothing to do with him. But he finds out where she is because she goes to the uncle. He doesn't realize that they've separated and anything, so he tells her that she's taking the money out, so he knows that she's got the money. So he eventually goes to her again and, kills her, and takes the money, and he flees. He flees back to the Big Dipper mine where he was when he was a child, and his parents were. He starts working there again, but he gets this sixth sense that somebody's after him. So he leaves, and the authorities are after him for the murder of Trina, and Marcus is part of the posse after him because he finds out and he forces himself on the posse. So McTeague's on the run. He's in a small little town. And he meets a prospector, and they want to go. They go out prospecting, and they find probably what could be a really rich mine. Or potentially a rich mine, but he gets this sixth sense again, so he leaves it all behind, and he hates himself for that. But he tries to escape across Death Valley, and we're nearing the end of the book. You might say, thankfully, but Marcus tracks him down halfway across Death Valley, and because he wants the money as well. He doesn't really care about that he killed Trina, to be honest. He just wants the gold. He feels that he's been robbed of this $5,000. So they get there. McTeague kills him, but just as he's dying, Marcus puts handcuffs on him, and so the last scene is them. He's sitting in the middle of Death Valley, chain handcuffed to a dead body, a dead weight. And the idea is that he's dead. I had a bit of problem with that because I'm sure McTeague had a knife. I don't need to go into details, or if he didn't, he's strong. He could break the wrist, and as I say, I won't go into details. I found it a fascinating book, and I realized I had a critical note that this is the best edition to have. This one has an interesting introduction, but this one's the best because it's got footnotes explaining like what steam beer is, but also too it shows the differences between the first edition where he had the second edition he had to change a few things, not a lot, but a few things, and it shows the change where it was, but also too. They had a manuscript, but in the 1920s they had some special edition made of this, and they gave away a sheet of the original manuscript with every one. Just insane. But anyway, somebody has tried to collect them all, but they don't have them all. But what pages they do have, the editors here put down any changes, and they quote from the manuscript. And it's got like huge amount, like 100 and some pages of critical material, which I haven't even read yet because I only sort of relocated this this week. Will read them because I like the story. But the interesting thing is, I've read a few sort of reviews and things about the book. It's not considered a classic. It's considered a minor classic. And the reason why it seems to be universal that it's not considered a classic because there's no beauty in it. Like none of the characters rise above and analyze what they've been doing and realize they might be doing something bad. I think that's just insane because it's There's people like that. They don't analyze what they do. They are this way and this way. It is doom and gloom in this. It descends. It's like a naturalist thing, like, a hereditary thing that the McTeague has from his father, that he's going to descend this way, and it's going to happen if certain environmental factors affect on him. And the same as Trina. Everybody pretty well is greedy in here, except the two old company, Mr. Granens, I think it is, the veterinarian type person, and the retired dressmaker. But they're just interested in themselves as well. He sells his invention of binding, or a certain way to binding, and so they wind up actually marrying. Anyway, happy ending for them. But everybody else, like Marcus, McTeague and Trina, they just descend into depravity. Just complete descending. And it's because of, environmental forces that do this. And they're saying there's no beauty in it, which I disagree, because there is some beauty, but on their terms. McTeague thinks, like, before he's married, the beauty is laying down on the Sunday, playing his concertina, his 6 tunes, drinking his steam beer and smoking his cheap tobacco, and then falling asleep. That's a beautiful day for him. So on his terms, that's a perfect day as beauty. And also he looks at, his canary, that's beautiful. He looks at, the Demichi print, and he finds that beautiful. So there's beauty on those terms, but anyway, that's the thing. So I've got a lot of notes here regarding the production of the film. It started sort of production in sort of late 1922. Erich von Stroheim, who was born in 1885 in Austria, in Vienna, possibly. There's a lot of controversy around his first years before he sort of comes to Hollywood, because he was a bit of a bullshitter, and there has been, details found out, which fine, but he sort of started working in Hollywood films as acting, and then he sort of rose up quite quickly from, like, he started around 1914, 1915 doing this. And before 1919, he was assistant director of D.W. Griffith. And then he went to Universal, and he talked Carl Laemmle into doing his own project for Universal in 1919. So he directs his first film, and just after like 4 or 5 years of being in Hollywood, which I think is quite amazing. And it was a hit, so it was fine. So he goes on to next ones, and he's making a film. I won't go into too much detail here, but it is so interesting. But anyway, he's making a film, and it's just going over budget. And Irving Thalberg at the time was working for Laemmle at Universal, so he had to confiscate the cameras to stop him from doing it, because he was going over budget, over time, everything. And then they get the film out. It's not what he wanted, but they took it from him, cut it and everything. And then he's making another film called Merry-Go-Round, and this is 1922, and near the end of 1922. And Thalberg has set it up so the only way he's going to make this is you're going to have someone there in charge of the money, looking over your shoulder, in charge of everything. And he didn't like this. He appealed to Laemmle, and Laemmle just wouldn't listen to him. Carl Laemmle was the head of the studio of Universal at the time. Well, all the time, for quite a while anyway. And eventually he didn't like this, and he rebelled again, and so Thalberg basically fired him, threw him off the lot. But he quickly went over to Goldwyn Company. Sam Goldfish started the Goldwyn Company with Archibald and Egan Selwyn, Broadway producers, in 1916, and they called it Goldwyn, Selwyn, and Goldfish, Selwyn. So, but then Samuel decided, hey, this is a good thing, so he changed his name legally to Goldwyn. So he's merrily on, and they hire him, They hire Stroheim, and then they all know, the stories, his rebellion and his wasting of money and time, or they thought it was. So they had this huge contract, 26-page contract set up for him to do. And they thought they'd keep him in check by this, because if he went over budget, if he went over everything, then they would be able to, they would take the money for him. So it's like, well, it's his own interest to do this. See, they didn't realize this doesn't affect Stroheim at all. He didn't care about that. He wanted to make a realistic film. And that's why he did this all he went to San Francisco to do this. Polk Street, where he would have filmed, was destroyed in 1906 by the fire and the earthquake and fire. So they couldn't do it there. They used a street or two next to it, and they sort of took over everything there. And they filmed within rooms, tiny rooms, hanging the camera from ceilings or into transepts, and he moved the action from sort of the late aught years of the early 20th century up to the teens and into the early 20s, where it ends, rather than the 1890s. But he still tried to get the sensibilities of the 1890s in there with things. And he had this fabulous way of filming where there's a depth of focus, where he's in the room and it's on it's the first floor up. In here they call it the first floor, but in the United States they call it the second floor. So it's not the ground floor, but the next floor. And you're looking out the window, and everything in the room is in focus, and everything outside the window on the street is in focus as well. It's just fabulous. The acting is understated, but yeah. Anyway, so he starts this production, and he writes this massive screenplay. Here's the screenplay that he uses. It's like 350 pages in this form. And it's been rumored that he just did a complete transcription page by page of the book. Everything that I explained in the description of the book is all in the film, or the way in his script, I should say. It's all in his script, and it's fabulous. Except it's not a transcription of the events. He changes things. He puts a big prologue at the beginning where it starts out in the film where McTeague is actually, they show him at the mine, and then eventually getting apprenticed, like his father dying, which wasn't in the book, and he getting apprenticed to the traveling Painless Peter, whatever the traveling dentist's name is, and they show that, and then eventually he winds up at Polk Street in San Francisco. None of that is in the book. It's only like a few paragraphs, maybe a page or two, that we get some hints of the back. So Stroheim stretches that out for for about 40 minutes, 45 minutes, or even an hour. It would have been in the original film. And then he changes things. He emphasizes things a little more. There's a lot of symbolism and metaphor that's in the book, but it's you could go on and on about those as well. But like for instance, he emphasizes this scene where I mentioned where McTeague forces himself, kisses Trina, and she's sexually excited, but she's repulsed at the same time from him, but she's sexually excited. So she goes home and tells her mother, and her mother is baiting mouse traps. Okay? And she's telling this story. So, it's like a sledgehammer, but it's pretty neat how he does it. And there's just dozens of things through this, with the canaries, a cat that sort of symbolizes Marcus after we don't know yet whether he's told, like we find out later that he's told the authorities that McTeague doesn't have a license, but then we see a cat attacking the canaries, because he gets another canary in the film, female canary, as a wedding present to his wife. So there's male and female. So a cat attacks that, and that's Marcus. It's pretty clear what's happening. So and filmed all this, and they doubled the budget once they saw the screen, and doubled the time. So they must have known that he wasn't going to film all this very easily, Yeah, I had a bunch of notes here about the Goldwyn Company and that, but I don't have time to do all that. But yeah, and so they raised it from 175K per picture, 175,000 per picture. He's supposed to do 3, 2 his own, and then he was supposed to act in the third one. But he put in this 330-page script, and then they increased it 347,000. But he wound up to it's like 7% of the script, 97 scenes, is the prologue that I was talking about, that he wrote about. And they started production and filming on March 13th, 1923, and on that day, Stroheim collapses from exhaustion of getting everything sorted. But he used the filming locations. They had problems because this is Prohibition era, and they had problems of putting up a saloon sign and doing things like that because there were issues. They had problems, but they worked them out. And then he goes back to the money, and he insists on going to locations. So after they film all the Chicago stuff, they go to Death Valley. And they're filming in like 141, 150 degree Fahrenheit temperatures. Cook dies, and Marcus, the actor that played Gene Hersholt, he got blisters. He was in the hospital a long time after that. Gibson Gowland, who plays McTeague, fared a little better. And then when they finished the Death Valley scenes, they go to the Big Dipper mine, the actual location. But it had been abandoned for at least 10 years, so they had to rebuild the shaft. And, he's filming underground. They could have filmed 50 feet or 100 feet underground. No, he goes 3,000 feet underground to film. That's Stroheim. And they had to reconstruct some buildings because they were falling down, build another building to house the crew. Unlike a lot of films at the time, especially D.W. Griffiths, there was no publicity with D.W. Griffiths, but this was set up to be publicity full. Every time, everything in San Francisco, it made sure that everything was in the newspapers. If somebody fell ill, or even stories, it was just constantly there, and there was constant crowds watching. And even other up and coming directors and stuff. Frank Capra visited the set one time, and he just couldn't figure out why Stroheim's taken all these takes for such a simple scene. And he wrote this. Capra wrote this in his sort of memoir, the name above the title later, and he just couldn't figure it out. And so Stroheim filmed a little over 500,000 feet or exposed to over 500,000 feet of 600 and some thousand feet, I think, of negative. And if that was put into film, that would be 85 hours ish. So he cuts it down to it's hard to tell because there's only been a few screenings, but around 8 to 10 hours long. He made 2 cuts. There was 2 screenings, and they freaked. The producers freaked and everything because now it's almost as if Thalberg was haunting Stroheim because Goldwyn was pushed out, and company was merged or bought with Metro Pictures. And then they eventually brought in Mayer, Louis B. Mayer, so it eventually became MGM Metro Goldwyn Mayer. But at the same time they brought in Mayer, Thalberg was hired to be head of production. So now, while he's editing all this. You know, he's got Thalberg on his back to get this done, and refuses. You know, he can't do 8 hours. Stroheim just figured, you know, you'd you know, show it over a couple nights, you know, like European films, but they just wouldn't have that. And they wanted to cut down to about like an hour and a half long, and he just couldn't figure it out, because he says they were doing longer films for comedy, so why couldn't they do this? But they thought, oh, it's depressive, you know, there's nothing, no beauty in it or anything like this. So, you know, he cuts it down as much as he can, and they still enough, and they took it from him. They gave it to a professional cutter, an editor who just, you know, was never read, like, Stroheim says, you know, this guy had nothing on his head except his hat, or on his mind. No, he had nothing on his mind except his hat, because he says he never read the book. He never, you know, he didn't know the story, the script, or anything. So he just cut it right down. Cut every extraneous thing. There's a bit of the prologue. They cut out all the supplementary stories of Mr. Grannis and the widow, or the spinster dressmaker, with Maria, the junkman. All that stuff is cut out, and so much other stuff. So they get it down to about 2 hours long, you know, and it flopped. They still wanted other cuts, because New York Film Board thought it was disgusting, because somebody was picking their nose, spitting, and they just thought that was so disgusting, and there was stuff that was blasphemous in it, so they had to make these cuts for New York and a lot of states around. Thankfully, those cuts were not on the negative, they were on the prints. But in the meantime, the history of this film, that's why it's considered sort of, you know, could be one of the best films ever made, but nobody's ever seen like Stroheim's full opus of it, because at some point they destroyed the film, and the last bit apparently might have been destroyed in the 60s in a fire. And for a long time, because nobody knew what it was, because it was being shot under the name McTeague still, but that was just, you know, the filming name. So the cans may have said McTeague, and nobody connected it to greed. But anyway, but in 1999, Rick Schmidlin, he restored the Touch of Evil, Orson Welles' to Orson Welles' notes. So he took this on. There's no film left, but there's stills. There's film stills. So he created a 4-hour film, like the smallest cutting down that Stroheim could get with some help, and he couldn't go any further than that. But that still wasn't small enough or short enough for them. But he restores it back to that length with the stills and a lot of quotations from the script and the book, and they just it's fabulous. That's what I watched. It's a I should have grabbed it here, but it's up on my piles here. I got sort of a pirated copy, because it only was put out in VHS. There's a couple European ones that are out of print now. It's never been a proper edition of this put out. But the one I got is pretty clear. It might be available on YouTube, but you can get these editions, these burned copies, if somebody's interested in this, the original. But you have to sit through a lot of stills, and they zoom in, and then they'll make zoom out and pan across to someone else. And they do, if you've seen Ken Burns' Civil War and what he does with the stills, that's what this guy does with Greed. And he also, because Stroheim wanted to have some color in it, there was a stencil process, which I forget the name now. But there was a stencil process where he wanted the gold to be golder and have blood scenes, like blood dripping from hands and stuff like this. So they made sort of stencils, and those were colored on the prints. And that was how this guy restored it in 1999. And I think it was done for TCM and played on TCM. But it got a lot of flack. It got a lot of flack because of the color. People didn't think that it should be there, but this is the way it was. The copy I have has no color in it. It's just black and white. That's why they need a good one where you can watch the black and white version, and you can watch the colored and tinted ones, because there was other tints as well that Stroheim wanted. But yeah, and the long 10-hour versions that he did, or the 8 to 10 hours, were only seen by a handful of people, and their descriptions vary, so it's really hard to tell. So, and Kevin Brownlow, in his Photoplay Productions, do I have a date for that? At some point, he put out the 2.5-hour version and played it in a few cinemas, I think, in Scotland. And people even then found it disgusting, the picking of nose and stuff like this. And they thought it was so depressing because there's no happy ending. It ends exactly the same way. Marcus is, the dead body of Marcus is handcuffed to McTeague in the middle of Death Valley, and they keep pulling out. And they make Death Valley sound like a lot bigger. Death Valley is only about 15 miles across, but like Marcus makes a comment, there's no water, because he shoots the mule because it's gone crazy to stop it because it's got water, and he shoots the canteen, the water canteen, so they have no water. And he says, there's no water for 100 miles. Well, that's not really true. So, but anyway, suspension of disbelief, which you have to use. But yeah, so that's it, and it is. I figured it would take me about 45 minutes if I was lucky. So, there's so much more to talk about this film, because, as I say, I've got the screenplay. It would be lovely just to do a detailed thing of how he changed, stuff and the scenes in the book and in here. It's not, as what most people say, a transcription of page by page. It's not. He enhances things. He puts things in the background. For instance, the Zerko, the junk man in the book, is Jewish. So, and Frank Norris was, I guess, an anti-Semite. And he's sort of described as a filthy Jew, the typical thing. So, and Stroheim was Jewish, so he just left all that out. Like, the guy wasn't even Jewish in the film. There was no mention of that, so he left that out. And another scene that usually they say is the only thing he didn't film was a fight between dogs. Yeah, that's not in the film, but it's in the book. But he takes these scenes where there's metaphor things like the cat that I said that attacks the cage to represent Marcus. That's not in the book. So he puts stuff like that. He stretches things out. He shortens things, and he puts other metaphor in, and it's just fabulous. And there's just so much more about the production and about Stroheim that's just endlessly fascinating. And I love it as a film, and I love it as, like, I finally got to see this. The guy who did the reconstruction, he doesn't call it a restoration because there's no film to restore. It's a reconstruction with the stills. Now, I read a little. I couldn't find it again, but I am quite sure in the last couple of years I read a little article that had a quote from Kevin Brownlow. Who's a silent film, he's the silent film guru, basically. He spent 50 years restoring Napoleon, and he interviewed dozens and dozens of silent film cast and crew, in the 60s and 70s before they died, and there's tons of this footage. But he in an article that was talking about silent film. And he says that a place that might have Greed or might have original cut or other film of it is Cuba, because the archives in places and there haven't been explored yet since Cuba has opened up. So it's possible. But he's found stuff in other places, like he's found bits of Nosferatu in the Czech Republic, in places in Russian archives. So there's still a possibility. And as some might be aware, that the Metropolis, the final sort of stuff, was found in a 16 millimeter or 9 millimeter print in Argentina. It was mislabeled in a canister. So they've now got Metropolis pretty well complete. With some stills, there's still some film footage that's missing. But, now you can watch Metropolis, and it makes 100% sense, and it just makes it that much better of a movie. So it's just, my point is that there is a lot of possibilities that this might get found sometime, and if it does, it'll be up there with the news for films, and it's one of the holy grails to look for. The other one is Todd Browning's London After Midnight with Lon Chaney. That's a holy grail as well. That got destroyed as well at some point. But anyway, I'll end it there. I'm not sure what I'm going to do next week, but I definitely will have a film for next week. That's to be announced, basically. So take care, BookTube. I hope you enjoyed this, and I do apologize for the length, but just think, it could have been 2 times or 3 times as long. I could have done that easily. Take care, BookTube.